Oh, I'm here. And I'm on. Nobody else seems to be. Nobody's here but us chickens. Okay, you're here. Nobody else seems to be. Okay. Naboo? No. Arcania.
For as long as anyone could remember, the Arcanians lived on Arcania, but some sources claim that it actually wasn't their original homeworld, and that the Arcanians had migrated to Arcania from their original homeworld in the distant past. But even if this was the case, Arcania
Yeah,
had
it's Star
long
Wars.
since become their homeworld, and the Arcanians had adapted to its harsh conditions quite well. Much like the Kaminoans, the Arcanians consider themselves the pinnacle of evolution, and while that says a lot more about their culture than their biology, they were
Well, I'm not going to talk about it in
very
Star
well
Trek. They're
adapted to
just
their
that's just
environment.
one big mess.
Arcanians were near humans, and most of them could easily be mistaken for humans from a distance. But there were a few traits that made Arcanians stand out. They had four digits on each hand instead of five, all tipped with claws, and their skin tended to be paler than most humans. Arcanians all had white hair, and their eyes lacked pupils, appearing bright white and featureless. These eyes could see well into the infrared spectrum, allowing Arcanians to see in the dark and detect sources of extreme heat. This was very useful on dark and frigid Arcania, although it meant that some Arcanians had to wear infrared blinders on planets with younger hotter suns.
In a lot of ways, yes.
Arcanians also tended to look slightly longer than the average human, and almost all of them were extremely intelligent. With all that said, there was a lot of variation within the Arcanian species, mostly because they subjected themselves to genetic manipulation. This was something they had in common with their rivals in the cloning industry, the Kaminoans. But while the Kaminoans altered their genome in pursuit of perfection through uniformity, the Arcanians sought genetic perfection through experimentation. Some Arcanians performed the genetic experiments on themselves, and most subjected themselves to some form of gene alteration or cybernetic enhancement to improve their capabilities. The Arcanians didn't have the same unified understanding of what genetic perfection meant, unlike the Kaminoans, and so their genetic experiments caused them to diversify into a number of subspecies, some with radically different traits from the baseline Arcanian.
So I'm writing down the
The
different
Arcanians
types of
created
ships
offshoots
that I'm
by altering the
planning,
genome of
but I'm
those
thinking I'm going to
Arcanians.
have to make them
The
smaller.
most prominent Arcanian offshoots were part Arcanian, part human. Part human Arcanian offshoots had five-fingered hands, human-like eyes, and stark white skin. These offshoots had been bred to be tougher than baseline Arcanians, since they were intended to serve as a manual labor class, although they were much more vulnerable to Arcanian diseases, even ones that were very mild or ordinary Arcanian. Despite their incessant genetic tinkering with their own species, however, the Arcanians were socially stratified according to standards of genetic purity, with baseline Arcanians at the top and divergent Arcanians lower down. The offshoots were seen as inferior and treated as second-class citizens, and at various points in Arcania, the Arcadian ruling class idly considered sadistic and genocidal answers to what they called an offshoot question. The Arcadians were stereotyped across the galaxy as immoral, mad scientists, and this stereotype was often accurate. Arcadian culture heavily emphasized education and research to the point that nearly all Arcadians were academically inclined in one way or another.
Well, let's see
Scientists
if I
were
can
held to
find
the
it.
highest
There is
standards
one
of
that's
academia.
about the
Arcadian
size
scientists were considered to be the best in the galaxy,
I'm
and their
thinking
culture
on
was
here.
unmatched. The scientists' dedication to their projects was legendary. They would sometimes work on nuclear over the course of
I'm
months,
not sure how many would
studying
work at this
experiments
small of a
that
size,
lasted
but
decades. Arcania's enormous wealth allowed them to keep their scientists well funded. This, combined with Arcanian scientists' dedication and confidence, meant that Arcania's technology was usually far ahead of most competitors. Unlike the Kaminoans, who focused near exclusively on experimentation, Arcania's scientific community was very diverse. While geneticists and biologists were prominent, Arcanians were also known for their highly remote
no,
opinions for other forms of high technology, as well as for their medical technology and doctors. In fact,
not the right
Arcanians benefited
one.
from many of the galaxy's most important leaps in medical and cybernetic technology, and much of their other research
Okay,
tended to be mostly
so
involving the average
I'm not even sure how big this one
that said,
is.
the Arcanians were most well
And I don't have a tape measure or a ruler or anything to measure it right now.
Fascinated by genetics.
I'd say it's about inch and a half.
This started as innocent curiosity, one that drove the Arcanians to
I would probably knock it down to an inch
study.
in
But
size.
the Arcanians did more than just study genetics, of course. They engaged in genetic manipulation without any regard for morality or consequences. This led to the Arcanians creating new species, inventing full productivity processes, and massive casts of slave laborers among many victims. As a consequence, the Arcanians didn't just have the cultist cultural society of power. Many outsiders consider Arcanian culture's defining trait to be a
Put
particular
that over
trait of
here.
arrogance, a byproduct of their belief that there was a superior universe. This arrogance drove intolerance, making the Arcanians believe they had the right to do what they truly even many of those Arcanians that didn't think themselves superior
Okay.
to non-Arcanians still believed that the Arcanians were
This
inferior
is about the size difference I'm
and
thinking.
limited, and they tended to be
I
excessively
did have one of
judgmental
the smaller
of
ships,
their
so
fellows. The Arcanian supremacist
that's
outlook
about
that
what I'm
many
thinking right
had
there.
got to be careful to prove themselves worthy of the Arcanian
Not
title,
so small that they're
an outsider
completely
often
tiny, but
faced
it'll allow me to do bigger
resistance
ships
from the offended
as
party.
part of the game.
The offended party would usually drag their name through the mud, and if the offender still refused to apologize, they would sometimes even get locked up or barred from the
And
world.
I know that my
Arcanians
flagship, this
listened
one in
to the
particular, can be able to
advice
do
of
it.
the First Lady, but it
I've
was
been going
instilled
through
in
this
them
whole week
by
and
the leader.
slowly making every
Mistakes could sometimes be
adjustments
punishable,
to everything while
the
trying to
Arcanians'
figure out what
lives
the
were
hell to do
often
with the rest of it.
ambiguous,
And
elusively torturous. They themselves could often be abrasive, condescending, and uncaring, especially to non-Arcanians.
you
As
see,
with any
the biggest
species, the
problem
Arcanians
with
disliked
designing this
when
game
many of them felt shame or at least embarrassment for
is
being
that some of the best
interested
ships
and
to actually
influenced
have
by
on the
society's arrogant
be
principles.
playable are all
While some
huge
of the most
ships.
fearless Arcanians were heartless, mad scientists, others were conscientious
Even at
leaders
the
who
scale of the
insisted on
smaller
integrity,
ships,
morality, and
the
betrayed
largest
no
ship in the
cost.
entire story is still going to take
The
up an
more
entire
audacious
freaking
the Arcanian Federation had a long
kitchen
history of
table.
collaboration with the Republic and the Jedi Order, and Arcanians hoped the galaxy for
So
something
I'd
more.
eventually have to do a
The
miniaturized
Arcanians
version
hoped the
as
Order
well.
and Arcanian
But
Jedi can
I'm
influence
not
others
really wanting to
to
do
influence
that
others
at
to
all
do
right
the
now.
same, with the Arcanian Jedi Master Archon ranking among some of the most honored and legendary members of the Order. As the existence of these dissenters illustrates, all the negative attributes of Arcanian culture weren't inherent to the Arcanians, but rather were just socially reinforced. For the most part, these flaws were proliferated and reinforced by Arcanian society, which was run by the Arcanian Dominion. The Arcanian Dominion was an ostensibly meritocratic corporatocracy, essentially a conglomerate of Arcania's most powerful corporations that managed the planet. Everything from the Arcanian superiority complex and the atrocities they perpetuated could be traced back to the philosophy of the Arcanian Dominion, which
The
Arcanians
only real
regarded as
problem with it is that there is actually a size smaller
Dominion rule.
than
The
the
Arcanian Dominion
normal
believed that
fighters,
profit
too.
and progress were what mattered most, and that virtue
There's
must
also
come
the
alongside
drones.
the pursuit of those goals. Morality and the well-being of those included. This was the source of the Arcanians' scientific ruthlessness. Arcanian corporations and the Arcanian Dominion demanded results and trained their scientists to seek them out without any regard for morality or consequence. The result was some of the worst atrocities the galaxy had ever seen. Arcanian society was also very heavily organized, since the unpleasant conditions of their almost frozen waste meant that most of the planet's inhabitants preferred to live in Arcania's comfortable, climate-controlled cities. Arcania's comfortable, climate-controlled cities. These were usually
In my universe, they're not droids.
carried out, ensuring that
In
residents of
fact,
Arcania
AI is basically illegal in my universe.
the only ones that lived out in Arcadia's extremes, for the most part, were the
These are
offshoots.
piloted
The offshoots were
with
free to
some
live in poorly protected
artificial
areas
intelligence
outskirts of the
involved.
kind of cities, typically the remnants of old mining camps, where the offshoots were kept segregated from the mainstream Arcadian population. The Arcadian cities were scattered across the planet, and the most prominent of them were built around the planet's spaceports, including Humphrey, Naranja, Trade City, and the planetary capital, Aristobulus. Located in the planet's snow-capped mountain, Aristobulus was not only Arcania's political capital, but also its commercial and financial hub, home to Arcania's most advanced
Well,
miner and
it's
trader,
actually
farmer,
for other
prince,
reasons.
and
Minor AI
aristocrat.
is perfectly legal,
Aristobulus was named
but
for
at
the
some
largest
point,
mineral divide
AI
that
is going to become
lies
incredibly
between
dangerous. Of
the
course, there's going to be
Arctic and
entire
Pacific
peoples
Oceans
of
over the Arcadian Sea.
artificially intelligent
Aristobulus also
creatures,
ran Aristo, or
but
formerly the Arasta Mining
once they
Company,
reach a
located
certain
in
point, if
on
it
the
becomes
coast of
truly sentient, then it becomes
Aristobulus
a
remained
danger
focused
to
on
everyone
engineering and
else
science, but it also
because,
dabbled in
well,
space technology
every
and
other
investment banking.
we can live forever.
Aristobulus
Why should we put up
actually
with all of
was
these
powerful
mortal
influence in the
meatbags?
galaxy
Is going to
under
be an
the
attitude problem.
extensively exert corporation, the galaxy's largest monopoly at the time. During the wars, Addiscorp was run by Lord Arco Augusta and the starship Arcanian Legacy,
Yeah,
under whom the
basically.
corporation orbit took over the Arcanian domain. After Araska was killed during the Mandalorian Wars, however, Addiscorp lost much of its power, though it continued to exist. There were many other powerful Arcanian corporations as well, among them a great many clone manufacturers. The most prominent of these was Arcanian Microtechnologies, which marketed itself as a producer of medical supplies and technology, but which focused on research and development of genetic engineering and cloning methods. Arcanian Micro experimented with all manner of genetic manipulation techniques, from gene editing to forcing mutation via massive radiation doses, and they were also among the galaxy's most prominent suppliers of clones. The Arcanian clone masters were ruthless and entirely immoral, the most extreme examples of the Arcanian science community's flaws. Of course, as we mentioned earlier,
It
the
was
grass
something
was
that was
still
coming
Arcanian.
up quite a bit in a couple of the stories I've been listening to
These
lately.
mines were scattered all
That's
across
the
the
high
planet, some were
technology.
located right outside the major cities, while
Humanity
others were
never
further
fully
afield,
went for full AI.
generally staffed by second-class Arcanian offshoots and non-Arcanian laborers. These mines were quite hazardous, but
Well,
they were nonetheless reliable sources of diamonds and
not.
other elite metals. All told, Arcania was a powerhouse in the galactic trade, exporting raw minerals, precious metals, diamonds, medical
In the
supplies,
point of
and even
view,
other
if you're
valuable
talking
items.
about an
This
entire
vital minerals
galaxy
were
and
also
maybe
untapped,
even multiple galaxies,
during the old Civil
there would
Wars,
be
many
many
Galactic
races
nations
that would
considered
view
exploiting the
humanity
mineral
as a
like
food
armor,
source.
commercial inhibitors, and personal
But it
protection
wouldn't
equipment.
just be
Some even used
that.
technologies the Arcanians made to filter out excess infrared light for protection against
You'd
irradiation
also
from
see that
space.
with other races
Arcanian
as
weapons
well.
were also very
And
versatile,
we're also
capable
talking
of
multiple planes of
cross-sectioning weapons
existence,
across
multiple
crystals,
parallel
contrasting solid
dimensions.
blasters, blasting
Well, I
rifles,
don't like
and
saying
super
dimensions,
rifles.
timelines,
Arcanian heavy blasters were especially popular as they
and
provided
all of
tremendous
that
firepower and
kind of
range.
converging into one thing.
Across the board, Arcanian technology had a reputation for being ahead of its time. During the Jedi Civil War, the most popular Arcanian
Well,
weapons were
Isaac
shields
Asimov's
and
work is the best one
turrets
for
made
that,
thousands of
but
dollars, but they still performed better than many modern equivalents.
iRobot,
However,
the
today,
movie, is
AI
not
was marketed
iRobot.
as
iRobot
heavy
was a
blasters and
series
armor
of short
that were
stories
insufficient
that
to
took
stave off
place before the
nuclear
book
attacks.
that they
They relied on
actually
products
made
like
into
drones,
iRobot the
all
movie,
told, Arcania hoarded more than it imported,
and it was
but they
called
had a few
Caverns of
iconic as
Steel.
well. Most
And
prominently,
in that one, you
Arcania
had
Primus
some
blasters,
robots that were
Primus
super
Maximus,
intelligent
robots
and
used to
completely
override the surface
independent
defenses
from
located
humans.
within the planet cities. These spaceports
but they weren't from Earth, they were from Mars.
was instead based out of a series of orbital space stations.
And then you had robots that were
These included Kazeb Mining Operations Center,
dealing with the ghost. The book basically deals with the ghost in the machine.
Florida's Paraga System
You
Star,
can make the rules that the robot will not cause itself harm,
a military space station that served as
it
a base
will
for
not harm humans,
in the grand scheme of things,
and it will do its best to protect all human life.
Conan, the Arcanians
That last one,
major power
yeah,
users, primarily because they were
not
able
just
to
that,
design
it's
reliable
also the high age of technology, the high human age of technology in Warhammer 40K
While the Kaminoans were
also
slower,
dealt a lot with
and
that.
perfectionist, the Arcanian method was much faster, much more efficient, and much more concerned with quantity
The
over
Machine
quality.
Man rebelled.
The Arcanian method began the same as the Kaminoan one. Cronies would take a cell from the template, extract the genetic code, implant that code into a plasma cell, and then gestate these cells in nutrient drugs.
And then
Specifically
there
designed
was
to prevent
even
cells
Star
from
Wars had a
splitting,
droid rebellion.
allowing codes to be grown to maturity
There
within
were
days.
entire there's an entire society of
That would make
3 planets that have droids that
giving
live
plenty of time
without
for the
humans or
Arcanians
anything
to act.
commanding them.
The Arcanians and most others, however,
They were
experimented
part of the Republic.
once more, growing their clones to adult
But
maturity
they
and
continue.
developing
See, the
genetic
difference
material
here
that
is
could
that
address
they
the climate
strive to
change.
become
The
more
Arcanians'
human,
solution to this
kind of
was
like Data in
flash
Star
training.
Trek.
Flash training used holograms to implant instructional images in the brains of clones while they developed, giving them a basic understanding of whatever the clone wanted them to understand. The Kaminoans also used flash training, but only in conjunction with other training methods, whereas the Arcanians used it to program their clones with everything they needed to know, from language to combat techniques. This form of training typically produced inferior results relative to more ordinary methods. Clones had a hard time learning complex tasks with flash training, and flash training could only impart knowledge, not skill or understanding. To remedy this, the Arcanians sometimes subjected their clones to memory inferencing as well. This involved the clones taking detailed brain scans of their templates and then downloading the brain patterns they received onto clones, which allowed them to bring their product up to speed
No
more
restraining
efficiently.
bolts.
In theory,
But
this
most
enhanced
droids
skill
don't
and
require
understanding
restraining
worked
bolts,
well,
anyways. I
but in
mean,
practice, it also tended to cause negative
the restraining bolt on 3PO's chest doesn't work, and they completely removed the one from
which harmed
R2.
any type of development, sometimes without any obvious evidence. Regardless of the cause, the effects were the same.
Droids in Star Wars are a little different, anyways. They're incredibly loyal to their masters. I mean, the absolute worst assassin droid in all of the Star Wars universe, not the IG 80, not the IG, but um, yeah, because there's another owner. Uh, but there was the IG series, which was the assassin droids, IG 88 or IG 88, which is the bounty hunter. That particular one was completely autonomous and didn't like humans, but in order to make its way in the galaxy, it became a hunter. Oh no, not Matrixes. No, in the way I'm looking at it, humanity just made the realization that AI was going to. Well, actually, AI was kind of snuffed out on Earth before it could get as bad as the Matrix or Skynet. Uh, let's see here.
tended to perform worse than Catalonians. They were less
But
skilled
there
in
were other
battle and vice
races
versa,
like
and they were less creative
the
in warfare, and
Dwabs
they tended to be more unstable.
and
Arcanians were
the
essentially living droids trained
uh,
for war, but they were much cheaper and
Hinarians
produced much
who
less
did
damage.
have technology get advanced
They
enough
were
to be able to
capable
do
of
that. They
technology,
just made the realization of how dangerous it was.
as a consequence, Arcanian cloning methods predominated in the Star Wars
And that's the
universe.
thing.
They
It's not
produced
so much
exceptionally
about
powerful
whether or not you
droids that
can do it or
far
if you
outpaced
should do it
Arcanians.
or anything
The
like that.
Arcanians'
It's
droid
whether or
count
not you realize how
somewhere
dangerous
between
this could be.
25,000 and 24,000 worldwide, becoming one of the first major non-military
Basically, in this
systems
universe,
owned by the Empire government. At this time,
due to the
the Empire
machinations
was
of some
already
very
divided.
evil
Following
people,
the first contact between the Arcanians and Republic scouts, it saw great opportunity
Earth
to
was
build a
basically
massive
falling
empire.
apart.
After learning that Arcania's abundant diamonds were a
And
source of
then
great wealth, the Arcanians began mining and exploiting
when
the
those people
Pacific
left
Oceanic
Earth,
frontiers of the Eastern
a
dependencies to a
the
wealthy
Yellowstone
Arcanian
volcano
republic trade.
and two other massive calderas all across the planet all blew up at the same time, sending humanity into the ice ages again.
A latent country. They used this opening to secure their
But
territory and
unlike
further
all of the
expand
other
their
things where,
empire.
oh, they end up in
Despite
Stone
great
Age,
population,
no,
wealth, and
I
economic
didn't go that way. I
prosperity,
went the opposite direction.
as Arcanians
They
grew and
continued to work on
powered,
technology,
they
but at
began
the
to
same
accumulate
time,
great
they
wealth and
learned
power.
they were fighting against
They were
creatures
also
that
the most
were
prominent species of the Republic, playing a decisive role in the
long
Empire.
forgotten
During the
enemies.
Alcican conflicts, Arcania was a staunch ally of Alcican, while during most of the Republic's other wars, its scientists worked closely with the Republic military. Throughout Republic history, however, the Arcanians' reputation was tainted by numerous scandals, many of them brought on by unethical experiments on other species. In 17,000 BBY, for example, Arcanian scientists working out past the Arcanian radar discovered and experimented on the four-armed Zexter explosion. Their experiments resulted in the creation of an entirely new species, the Thermians, which you might know as Yarrow species. The Arcanians eventually abandoned these experiments, fearing Republic sanctions should they be discovered. After all, the reason they'd started experiments so deep in the Outer Rim was because the Senate had outlawed these sorts of genetic experiments after the Arcanians attempted them back home. Of course, once the Republic made contact with the Thermians and the Zexter a millennia later, the truth came out, although the Arcanians were never punished. The Thermians, for their part, didn't care all that much, although the Zexter were much less happy about the whole affair, having denied the Thermians were related to them for years before the truth came out. As an
But right now, I'm just worried about the ships. What other types of ships do we have? Let me look at that one at all.
earlier, other Arcanian experiments led to the creation of the Arcanian offshoots who were pressed into service as manual laborers across Arcania. The creation of the offshoots was eventually recognized by mainstream Arcanian society as a horrible
Basically,
tragedy,
yeah.
but not for the right reasons. Rather, the Arcanians became ashamed of how their ancestors had messed with their own genetics rather than how they had attempted to create a slave race. And many pure-blood Arcanians believed that the solution to the problem their ancestors had created was genocide. Such views were especially prominent among the House of Rasta, which repeatedly tasked Ataturk with secretly engineering and releasing plagues meant to wipe out the Arcanian offshoot invasion. The Arcanians achieved the heights of their power and prominence in the galaxy during the Old Sith Wars, particularly around the time of the Mandalorian Wars. Part of this prominence was due to ties with the Sith and the Jedi. During the time of the original Sith Empire, prior to the Great Hyperspace War of 5000 BBY, the Sith actually had a secret stronghold on Arcadia, the Great Sith Library, Vishas Tuan. It's unclear how this was even possible given how deep Arcania was in Republic space and how isolated the Sith was at the time, but most sources indicate the library was extremely secretive and known only to the Lords of the Sith. Regardless, Vishas Tuan was an enormous complex hidden deep in Arcania's snowy wastes, primarily built underground. It was 5 square kilometers in size, including like a labyrinth, and it housed the Sith Empire's largest collection of records, scrolls, holocrons, and artifacts, as well as temple facilities and sealed chambers where Sith sorcerers could conduct experiments. The place was so huge and maze-like that even the most competent Sith lords tended to get lost in it, and most found it near impossible to find whatever they came to Vishas Tuan for. However, Vishas Tuan's time didn't last. The Jedi learned that it was located in Arcania during the Great Hyperspace War, and they promptly dispatched a strike team to destroy it. The Jedi successfully drove the Sith from Arcania, and they completely destroyed Vishas Tuan as well as most of its contents. Only a few artifacts and holocrons were taken by the Jedi for study, as the Jedi wanted to destroy as much of the Sith's teachings as possible to prevent a Sith resurgence in the future. Some later Sith
Yes.
historians considered the destruction of Vishas Tuan to be the single greatest blow ever dealt to the Sith.
That's
Despite
one of the
the
big
enormous
things.
influence of Arcania, the Jedi set up shop at the
I
Convoy,
will never be able to
successfully
put
attempting to return
even a light cruiser
circa 4000 BBY. It
in
was
if
confident that
there's
after his
24 of
death,
these
Arthur
in the
established
ship.
a small Jedi Praetorium on Arcania where he began training apprentices in the ways of the Jedi. Arthur himself was an Arcanian
And
offshoot
they're supposed to be
who
able to
was
carry a
involved
hell of a
in
lot more
many
than that.
high-profile Jedi operations, including the defeats of the Royal Raiders and the end of the Great Droid Revolution. Master Arthur built his training academy deep in Arcania's wilderness, far from any of its diamond mines, near the outskirts of one of the planet's smallest spaceports. The Praetorium was small, designed to host up to 20 students at a time, but many prominent Jedi were trained there over the years, among them Prim Nahulis, Barrison Dre, Tosh Donita, and Ula Tenkei for Jedi. In 4000 BBY, Archachev and his apprentices temporarily relocated to Onderon to resolve the peace wars there, but Master Archa's Praetorium on Arcania remained in operation, and it even stuck around for a few decades following Archa's death on the eve of the Great Sith War. By the start of the Jedi Praetorium, as well as Arcania's enormous industrial importance in the Republic, brought the Arcanians to the height of their power. At the time, the planet was effectively ruled by Lord Arthur Agasta, who made Arcania into a major Republic military stronghold. But as the Mandalorians began beating the Republic badly, Agasta began playing both sides, offering to sell weaponized
Oh, it's doable. I know it's doable. It's
this
just
soon went sideways
bringing it
when
down in
one of the
size
Arcanian
could cause
Jedi
problems.
servants turned the space
I
station
know I
to
need to do
destroy
it.
the ship
I'm
without
just not
even
sure
noticing,
how to do it.
destroying it and killing Lord Agasta in the process. This was a significant blow to Addiscorp, though not necessarily for Arcania as a whole. Arcania remained a prominent Republic stronghold throughout the rest of the Mandalorian Wars and into the Jedi Civil War, supplying Republic forces with blasters, personal energy shields, and medical equipment. Arcania became less prominent in later wars with the Sith, but remained a staunch supporter of the Republic through all of them, even through the Republic's Dark Age at the end of the New Sith Wars. During the Great Peace of the Republic, the Arcanians continued to rank among the galaxy's most prominent scientists, and they also continued a long history of unethical experiments on other species. In 490 BBY, this led to the Arcanian Dominion authorizing its researchers to begin conducting experiments on one of the Arcanian's native species, the Yucca. The Yucca were an unintelligent species, and the Arcanians considered them barely sentient. To that end, Arcanian had the Yucca's brains almost entirely replaced with cybernetics, attempting to make them much more intelligent. The experiments were successful. The cybernetically enhanced Yucca became some of the most intelligent beings in the galaxy, but this came at a cost, as the enhanced Yucca lost the ability to feel emotion. The cybernetically enhanced Yucca took over their society, and they began upgrading their children at birth of their own accord, wanting their offspring to be like them. Over the course of centuries, all Yucca became cybernetically enhanced, and the species was
Not worried about it.
many in the galaxy saw this as an act of genocide. The Arcanians had essentially eradicated the original Yucca culture, redesigning the species according to their own desires. The new Yucca might have been smarter, but this came at the cost of emotional modernization, and it also gave them a dark and sometimes cruel sense of humor, born of boredom and a lack of meaning. The Arcanian Dominion had utterly destroyed a peaceful people and replaced them with a society of cruel sociopaths. Some historians consider this the worst atrocity in Arcanian history, which was saying something considering what came after. Many Arcanians were among those who objected to the experiments in Yucca, and over the course of these experiments, this led to a steady rise in unrest on Arcania itself. Those who opposed the experiments repeatedly petitioned the government to stop them, but the Arcanian Dominion proved entirely unpalatable. Eventually, the objectors gathered together under the banner of the Arcanian Renegades. The Renegades made one last petition to stop the experiments on the Yucca in 50 BY, and when the Arcanian Dominion refused, the Renegades attempted to overthrow the government, beginning the Arcanian Revolution. The Arcanian Renegades began the revolution with noble goals. They planned to overthrow the Arcanian Dominion, set themselves up in its place, and put an end to its unethical practices. As the revolution wore on, however, the Renegades consistently found themselves at a disadvantage, and their scientists ended up turning to the same sorts of horrible genetic experiments they had set out to stop in order to get ahead. They created an army of cyborg warriors known as the Assimilators, made using all sorts of obscure and highly illegal techniques, which were made of a patchwork of droid components and alien-born parts. The Assimilators were meant to be living weapons, and they were instilled with bloodthirsty, warlike personalities. Since their biomechanical nerve centers were decentralized, the Assimilators were able to replace any part of their bodies with droid parts or even pieces of organic beings. They were known to repair themselves after battle by taking limbs and other body parts
All I need is a list of the sizes of ships
of failures that were needing
so I can look at it and decide for myself.
an infamous assimilator for
I
what
mean,
was
it's pretty
already
bad that I can only get up to medium freighters on size.
as it previously was. The Renegades' army of assimilators massacred the Arcanian Dominion's forces and supporters, giving the Renegades the upper hand in the revolution. In the process, however, the Renegades lost sight of their original mission, and they now only cared about exacting revenge on their political rivals. The bloodthirsty assimilators were all too happy to do this for them, slaughtering civilians by the thousands in their campaigns against the Arcanian Dominion. In response, the Dominion deployed its own horrors. A group of Dominion loyal Arcanians known as the Techno-Lords created a clone army known as the Accelerated Transgenic Realistic Upgrades. They did so by splicing Arcanian genetic sequences with those of a number of dangerous creatures, among them Lactals, Dianovas, Yucca, and Amorphins. The resultant monstrosity was 4 meters tall, incredibly strong, capable of digesting literally anything and highly regenerative. The Abhorrent template was cloned, and the clones were all upgraded with cybernetics that greatly enhanced their intelligence. Once the army was complete, the Dominion unleashed its abhorrers against the Renegades. The two sides of creations fought to a draw, and the Arcanian Revolution became a bloody standoff. Eventually, it fell to the Republic to intervene. After the Arcanian Dominion renounced the Techno-Lords and stopped the use of the Outlaws, the Senate sided with them, and the Jedi were sent in to bring an end to the conflict. The Jedi Task Force, which included the Iron Knights under young Mace Windu, ultimately destroyed the assimilated army and defeated the Arcanian Renegades, bringing the war to an end. The victorious Arcanian Dominion attempted to destroy the remaining assimilators and outlaws, with only a few escaping Arcania, and it had the remaining Arcanian renegades executed. Following the Arcanian Revolution, Arcania more or less returned to normal. In the wake of the war, the Arcanians moved away from their experiments in Yucca and began expanding their cloning operations, using lessons learned from the Arcanian Revolution to clone high
Hmm.
limbs and organs to those in need. As the galaxy descended into separatist crisis, Arcania remained staunchly loyal to the Republic and remained a Republic bastion throughout the Clone Wars. This was despite the fact that, at the start of the conflict, the Senate outlawed all non-military cloning. Arcadia was granted an exemption, but it was still prohibited from exploiting its clones or cloning technology. For Arcania's clone masters, however, their loyalty to the Republic did eventually pay off. Midway through the Clone Wars, Supreme Chancellor Palpatine secretly contracted the Arcanians' top clones to produce a second clone army to be grown via specialized Spartite cloning cylinders on one of Coruscant's moons. These clones were clones of Jango Fett, but they were created and trained according to Arcanian techniques rather than Clone. This second army of Spartite clones was kept a closely guarded secret and was only deployed at the very end of the war, at the end of the Battle of Coruscant. These Spartite clones provided a massive flood of reinforcements to the Great Army of the Republic, and they were deployed all across the Outer Rim to participate in the Republic's final offensive to rush the CIS, supplementing the previous state coming out of the after the rise of the Arcanians supported the New Order, and Arcanian scientists were frequently collaborators with Imperial military researchers. Officially, the Arcanian Dominion stayed out of the Galactic Civil War. It was no secret that they favored the Empire. Many Arcanian scientists worked for the likes of Glenn Moff Tarkin and Grand Admiral Zari, designing advanced TIE fighters and bioweapons for use by the Imperial military. As a consequence of this collaboration, many rebels distrusted or disliked the Arcanians, and very few Arcanians joined the Rebel Alliance instead. When the New Republic rose to power, it initially forbade Arcania from joining it over its scientists' work on Imperial bioweapons. The Arcanians, for their part, wanted nothing to do with the New Republic either, as the Arcanian Dominion was worried that the New Republic would pass strict regulations on scientific activities. Eventually, however, tensions between the two grew. The Arcanians helped the New Republic eradicate the Stone Mites in 24 ADY, and Arcania joined the New Republic's successor state, the Galactic Federation of Free Alliances, after the Years of War. So that's our look at the Arcanians. The mad scientists who even dared to come along and run for their money. But what do you think? Are there any other Star Wars species or planets you'd like us to take an in-depth look at? Make sure you let us know all that and more in the comment section below. And as always, guys, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video. 1990 was one of the new era years of G.I. Joe, but in this year they produced some of the most awesome vehicles of all time. Literally, right? Here, this is every vehicle in 1990. After just like a video, that's how the biggest in 1990. Check that out here. All those vehicles. There's some surprisingly awesome vehicles here that do things, especially in this video of our figures. We're going downhill now, right? We reached our peak in 19, I think, where to some slip offs. But we're still a good area. We're still trying to get short with who is finally awesome vehicles here. Some all-time greats. And so we're going to get into that. The number one being one of my absolute favorite vehicles. All of the images from this video are taken from Really Joe's Hot Wild, incredible source for anybody who is passionate about Georgia and interested in Georgia. Check out Really Joe's Hot Wild. Okay, let's get into it. At the very bottom of the list, and I would say like there's not a lot of bad here. It's not. It's just a pretty clean year for vehicles, surprisingly. Okay, but at the bottom of this, I'm going to put Overlord's Dictator. This thing makes zero sense to me at all. It looks like somebody just slapped the blade on together and bought minutes and created a blade, and it's just stupid. I don't get it. The idea of I like the Overlord itself as a character, as a villain, it's interesting, but I just don't buy this vehicle in any way. So the idea is that it's skinned a bit, and as it popped out, and do the height for what purpose, why, what is it, I don't get it. And then it's like some stupid, like squatting animal of some sort. And that is also, we have a literally the best detachable jetpack, again, okay, it's not good. It's just the design is not good here. And I put a thought into it. Because every year you got that special. Starting with Dark a new specialist who holds it every single year. It's so fast because every one of them stands out as being awesome, coming with a cool vehicle. And this one is put very high on the list. Overall, it's still doing pretty cool for us up on the bottom because that list is so good. We've got our Zanzibar, Destro, overhead, we're talking about Serpento, we're talking about Sartre and Blue, all these every year, it's just awesomeness. And then you get this thing, and it's just like, what is next to the light with the focus.
Dreadnoughts are going to have to be on there at some point.
If you get the general, you got the one with it, it's just awesome by itself. And it's a tiny little top of the helicopter. Fine. Yeah, fun. Next to that, with battle fun. What was battle fun? Again, we're like at this point of G.I. Joe, they jumped the shark a little bit. I mean, vehicles are like kind of crazy looking. Like it's you see Jiggly and Red and the back, different vehicles. But still kind of awesome, cool idea. And this is a real weird one. This is a bizarre one. But I guess in concept I kind of like because it is it's a mobile battle. It's meant to just be like an absolutely heavy, underrated thing. But then you run your applications and do everything you do. That pop open, this one comes out, and it's very the sense because it's going to be a fat pop. You got to hold it out. Because what's just living this way, sitting, and however, I think it is.
Well, everybody's gone silent, not even trying to say anything. Maybe it's time to call it.
Jet. This is a perfectly great jet that lies next to your arsenal of overhead vehicles.
Well, I know you're here.
Definitely towards the top.
Yeah, have a good night, Justin. Have a good day at work tomorrow. Yes, Allison, you're here, but you're not saying anything.
Still good. You're not that you before you have it. You're saying you compare to like go out there and carry vehicles in the Air Force. It's low. Okay, next in line we have Destro Dominator. I think that this is one of the lesser kinds of unit vehicles. This is masks to me. This is not. This is the GI Joe, right? It's a tin that becomes a helicopter. It just looks kind of junky with any ideas of how to create this thing from the helicopter to fly in and but one of those tracks pulled out is not very satisfying, not very sturdy. Sometimes I look at the light tank lower. I said, it's like, you really can't, I haven't got full tank with it. There's primes with your colors, the design is inspired, especially for some of the leadership, which I think is pretty crazy. So the rest of this video, I think, is a lot of fun process. This is surprising to the viewer who stays and that's what's awesome and not much cheers because I think we learned that a lot of bad vehicles. Again, there's like a lot of what happened when after they got trash. It might be
Well, you're the one who wanted me to make the big, huge ships. Maybe you want to put your 2 cents in on whether or not I should make it smaller so that I can put the bigger ships in.
this is the case here for a lot of the Sky Patrol vehicles. Now we got some of the great GI Joe vehicles we have. We have
Well, I would have to in order to make the ships.
way more badass stuff. At the bottom of that, I think all of you are right. At the bottom of this, we have the Skyhawk. This is a chrome Skyhawk. Anyway, I think any of these little vehicles, there's something really fun about them. They're easily manipulated. You end up with, couple and have a real dog fight. Trying to have a dog fight skyscraper. It's tough. It's really good. Either now, now it's the dragonfly. I'm fighting with a raptor. They're going to cross fight skills. Same wow. It's a lot. It's a little bit skyhawk. Small video. Beautiful. But it's grown. This is very profound. A lot of very features. First, has 6 volt flexible missiles that use the same applicability that we had with
Hmm.
it also has this weird disc, which okay, there are no disc
Well,
mechanisms.
I think I'm going to call it quits for tonight, anyways. We'll see what everything happens. I'll do some tests and shut this week, and we'll see what it looks like. If I can even get the printer working. Mostly, I'm really fucking tired, so I'm gonna turn it off and call it quits. You guys, anybody who's still on, which is pretty much just Allison, have a good one. Anybody who watches this later, we'll see what it looks like in a future episode. Have a good one. Bye.